Chapter 9. Maybe it was because he ate too much lunch. Andy was sleepy. When the dishes were scrubbed with sand and washed, he crawled into the tent and went to sleep. Jud was glad, not because he did not like to play with Andy, but because he liked to be alone in the woods once in a while. Jud started to hike up the brook. He had not gone far when something leapt up from the edge of the creek and darted right across the trail in front of him. It was a rabbit. He could see the white cottontail bobbing along as he zigzagged through the bushes. Jud went down to the edge of the beach where the rabbit had been. Sure enough, there were his tracks on the wet sand, 2 big ones side by side and 2 little ones behind. He knew that the big ones were made by the rabbit's hind feet, because when he runs, his little front feet touch the ground first, and his big hind feet go beyond and hit the ground in front. He walked on a little further when, kerplunk, a big bullfrog jumped into the water. Jud crawled up to the edge of the bank and laid on his stomach, waiting to see how long the frog would stay under the water. The bank was about 2 feet high here, and he could look through the bushes right down onto the water. But Jud was not to see the frog come up. He was soon fast asleep. The next thing he knew, he heard a gentle quacking sound. He opened his eyes on a wonderful sight. There on the water, right in front of him, were ducks, wild ducks. He held his breath for fear he would scare them. Wild ducks, and so close he could touch them with a stick. His heart pounded so loudly, he was sure they would hear it. He counted them. There were 8 in all. The ducks swam slowly around, quacking softly to themselves, now and then sticking their green heads under the water. They are beautiful, thought Jud. I wish I could be this close to them always. Jud! Jud! Where are you? It was Andy calling from camp. Jud did not answer, lest he scare the ducks. He could hear Andy's footbeats as he came running down the trail toward him. Jud! He yelled. Suddenly there was a mighty whir and splashing of water. Jud jumped back, and Andy stopped short. The ducks flew off and away like an arrow from a bow. So fast did their wings beat the air that the sound was a steady roar. You scared them! You scared them! Yelled Jud angrily. You scared my ducks! Why don't you come quietly? What's so important about ducks? Asked Andy. They're wild ducks, and I was right by them, said Jud sadly. Wild ducks? Nothing, retorted Andy. Some farmers' ducks came over here, that's all. They heard Dad calling from camp and ran back. Dad, I saw some wild ducks, so close I could almost touch them. Then Jud told Dad the story. They are mallard ducks, said Dad. I've seen them here before, but I never got so close as you did. These ducks live here all year round. They don't go north in the summer like most ducks. I thought I would never get so close to wild ducks, said Jud. That's because you were quiet and lay still, said Dad. If you had been walking along, you would have never seen them. It's when you lie still for a long time that you see the animals and birds. It's the still hunter that sees the big game. Chapter 10. It started to rain, and Dad and the 2 boys made a dash for the tent. It was crowded in there, with 3 of them in the little pup tent. They were stretched out like sardines in a can, and it wasn't much fun to stay packed in there for nearly 2 hours while it rained. You know what we ought to do? Said Jud. Build a lean-to. We can sleep in the tent at night so the mosquitoes can't get us, and when it rains, we could sit under the lean-to and have lots of room. We could keep our stuff in the lean-to also. That's a swell idea, said Dad. I'll draw you a picture showing how to make it, and you can build it tomorrow. Dad got a paper out of his pocket and started to sketch. The picture he drew showed the framework of the lean-to. Dad said, "We'll need some evergreen boughs to thatch or cover the roof with. There are some balsam and white cedar trees up the creek near where you saw the ducks. Break off the branches about 2 feet long, but don't take too many from the same tree." Andy was eager to chop the poles the next morning. He was good with the axe and liked to chop. He cut 2 forked poles 5 feet long for the uprights and sharpened them at the bottom. The boys drove these into the ground and put a ridge pole between them, resting it in the forks. Then they leaned 5 long sticks against the ridge pole and tied cross poles across them, just as in the picture Dad drew. "It looks like Dad's picture," said Jud, when the framework was finished. "It must be okay. Now let's go get some evergreen boughs." They made several trips to the evergreen trees, bringing back big armloads of balsam. Jud started at the bottom of the lean-to and began to thatch the roof with twigs. He laid the balsam twigs on top of the cross pole and stuck the butt ends under the next cross pole above. When he had finished the bottom, he started putting the next row, putting the tips of the twigs over the butt ends of those in the lower roll. It took a long time to thatch the lean-to, but it was fun and the campers were proud of the job they did. Dad helped them finish it at night. "Sometime we ought to get some more boughs and put a second layer on the roof," he said. "One layer isn't enough for hard rain. And we ought to put a layer of boughs on the floor, too, making a balsam bed so we won't have to sit or lie right on the ground." "There's that fool squirrel again," said Andy, as he picked up a stick and threw it into the tree above the lean-to. "He talks too much." "He's singing his war song, I told you," said Jud. "Better let him alone. You'll make him madder than ever." "Oh, who's scared of a squirrel?" said Andy. "All he can do is talk and say nothing."